Teachers, what's the most disturbing thing you've confiscated off a student? A drawing of me laying on my back on the floor with knives sticking out of my chest/stomach. Him standing over me with a couple classmates with smiles on their faces. Very clearly my classroom. That, paired with the kill misses club oath he'd written about killing me and having no mercy. Fun times. Back in high school, this girl brought a needle to school and was walking around the halls poking people with it. It was confiscated. Obviously, they were able to determine that it had not been used by her to inject herself or anyone else with anything. They did have to go around and find everyone that had been poked though, to make sure no one had any diseases. I remember when I was in middle school, a fellow 8th grader's dad was a tattoo artist. Somehow this kid had managed to bring his dad's tattoo equipment to school, and it was confiscated when he tried to tattoo another kid whilst his friends held this kid down. Pretty sure it was going to be a forced tattoo, but a teacher was walking by and heard the screams and stopped it. You don't wanna know how often I explained to middle schoolers that having nudes of each other on their phones and passing them around constituted child pornography and that they could be charged. Had this happen at a neighboring school, hundreds of high schoolers were involved. At first they tried to confiscate phones they knew had them. One kid even broke his phone completely to avoid trouble. Team player. But eventually they gave up and made a big announcement that they didn't want to charge a bunch of high schoolers with child pornography because it wasn't intended for those kinds of incidents. Student had brought a puzzle to school, but the pieces didn't match. Turned out it was a single piece from all the puzzles we kept at school, making every single one of them unsolvable. My crazy mom thought it would be cool to give me a coconut and a knife for lunch one day. I got in trouble for having a knife. 2nd grade. I was just hungry. She thought it would be a cool thing to bring to school. When I was in high school, one of the percussionists in the lowest level band class was suspended for a couple days after a dead squirrel was confiscated from his book bag. He evidently was planning on putting it in the band teacher's desk. My band teacher thought it was funny, but was otherwise generally unfazed by the news. I was with a VP as we searched a girl's bag, and we found a burner phone, $3,000 cash, and her black book of clients. She was 18, so not much we could do, but man, it made shit real when you consider she had a book with about 20 men's names in it and what they liked. Second weirdest was the kid who brought 3 fish he had caught that morning. He just wanted to kill them. Like didn't catch them for food, but just to kill them. One of my students turned in an assignment on a flash drive with a bunch of BDSM porn on it. No, it wasn't intentional. Had to take about a dozen condoms from a 3rd grader once. He was getting them from the older kids after school and playing with them. He had no idea how to use them, but he sure liked blowing them up like balloons. We once had a middle school kids bring a turtle to school. A teacher heard kids talking about it in the hallway. She alerted me, and sure enough, in his locker we found a red-eared slider in a gym bag. I kept the turtle in my office and he took it home at the end of the day. A cat. One of my students brought his cat to school zipped up in his sports bag. Poor little thing. My mom was a teacher and she had to take a lighter away from a student after he lit his test on fire. Not a teacher, but when I was in 5th grade, our teacher tripped over a kid's backpack. She was like, "What do you have in there? Bricks?" And he really did have bricks in there. A dead bird he'd found outside and decided to keep in his pocket. It was only disturbing because I then also had to touch a dead bird from outside. Not my story, but my psychology teacher used to work with underprivileged kids. One student, maybe 6 to 8 years old, really enjoyed his class and gave him a jar as a gift. What's in the jar? Jelly? Jam? No. The teacher noticed cuts all over the boy's arms and slowly puts the jar down. It was full of old/new blood, completely filled. He figures that the kid saw it as a part of him and probably saw it as something very symbolic and meaningful. He says he was told when he started to never look up the kids he worked with because very few times is it a happy ending. The teacher's a great person. I imagine he just got a counselor and had an ambulance check the kid out and dispose of the jar. The kid's mother was also a drug addict. Close bracket. Human finger, she insisted she'd found it by the ravine and just thought it was cool, so kept it until she'd decided what to do with it. But that means she'd either found a lone finger or she was leaving out a part of this story. A cannonball. It was in their locker. I guess it's not really disturbing, but it is odd. Students attached human hair to a piece of paper with band-aids. It was very creepy. A student came running to me during a break once and wanted to drag me to a class to show me something. I went along, and once there, he directed me to a student's desk. There was an open notebook lying on the desk detailing my full name, birth date, address, license plate, and other insane stuff. We immediately took her to the office after she returned. Police was called. They confiscated her phone. She had her entire album titled Teachers or Professors Don't Remember, and quite literally every single teacher she had was in there. I was in 4 pictures, some of which she took secretly in class. The others were old ass pics from my old Facebook. Was a bit creeped out, to be honest. I remember there was a report of a student having a gun in his backpack, and he reached for it, but the teacher broke the kid's hand with one of the textbooks before he could get to it. Once defended a kid who brought a gun to school. The kid next to him saw it in his bag, told his friend, and one of them jumped on top of him, while the other grabbed the bag and ran out of the room. Teacher started yelling at them for horseplay in class until he figured out what was really going on. Turned out that the kid wasn't planning any trouble, just had an unstable living situation, semi-homeless, and didn't know what else to do with his stuff other than carry it with him. Still caused an ungodly amount of trouble. My best friend in junior high decorated the inside of his locker with a ton of pentagrams, and when a teacher saw it she freaked out and pulled him into the office, got the principal, and called his parents. My best friend was also kind of a chicken. We loved watching scary movies and reading horror novels and that kind of thing, but it was not without some consequences, like being awake for days and terrified of our own shadows for a while. As everyone was grilling him, his mom says he just clammed up and refused to say a word. Eventually that made the grown-ups more angry, and they demanded that he explain himself. Was he trying to summon demons or worshipping the devil? They eventually broke him, and he spilled it. He wanted to give the impression that he was edgy and cool and into dark magic, but he was too afraid that it would work on accident. So instead of using pentagrams, he used a bunch of the Star of David. Sure enough, the principal marched them all to his locker, the teacher calling him a liar the whole way. When they arrive and open the locker wide, they find not a shrine to the Dark Prince, but of the iconic Jewish symbology. Everyone was too hysterical to really keep a stern tone, and he was let off the hook. I think they still made him take it down though. One of my favorite stories. So a girl was getting searched for drugs. I was the witness. My male VP was going through her purse taking things out. She had a dildo, except at first he didn't realize. He's holding it, opening the back of it, and looking into the battery compartment, when suddenly he realizes what he is holding. Wish I had a camera. I worked as a percussion instructor, think an assistant marching band director, but just for the drummers, for several years. There was one student who was a kind of tertiary friend. He had a circle of friends, but he was on the outer edge of that circle, a bit of a loner. Quiet and sensitive, really nice, a bit of a clown. Intelligent and insightful, but without direction or drive. At the end of the marching season, it came time to turn in all the music binders. I was going through and making sure all the music that had been handed out had been turned back in, and I found a handwritten suicide note that had gotten left in the binder. That was about 6 years ago and he's fine, but it was the single biggest adversity I ever had to overcome in my time in the field of education. Obligatory, not a teacher, but I was in art class when my teacher told a student to throw a note she was passing around away. The note was a super graphic love letter sent by this girl's boyfriend, detailing how he'd fuck her asshole and a bunch of bondage type shit. The weirdest part was this girl didn't have any friends in that class. She just stood up and passed it around to the popular kids, like she was proud of it. This girl was pretty out there, so our teacher didn't even have a reaction to it at that point. We found $15K in cash in the book bag of a second grader when I was a teacher. Turns out he was a runner for the neighborhood gangs. He was 7. 2 huge hunting knives from a first grader. Blades were 6 inches long and one was locked open. He had taken them from his dad's hunting gear and was showing them off in the boys' bathroom. His mom had passed when he was 4 and his dad was doing the best he could to raise and provide for 3 kids.